Hello everyone and welcome to this new lecture. In the previous lecture, we were able to cover the basics of for loops, and we covered a couple of special keywords such as how to do break, how to break a loop, how to continue within a loop, and we've covered as well a couple of the advanced topics within loops, which is how to perform nested loops, which is kind of a loop inside a loop. All right, in this section, we're going to learn kind of a little bit of advanced topic, or so we'll call it list comprehension. Okay, all right, let's take a look at the description first, and then we're going to take a look at an example. All right, so list comprehension kind of is an elegant tool, is used to transform one list into another. Okay, so let's assume that I have, for instance, a list, and I want to take that list and let's say square each element within that list. All right, I have two options to do it, or I have two ways of doing it. First one is to simply create another list and go ahead and do a loop within each specific element within the first list, take it, square it, and append it and put it in a different list. All right, this is kind of a very basic way of doing it, and actually we're going to start by doing that basic way, and I will show you how can we use list comprehension to make it way 10 times even easier. All right, let's take a look at an example. Let's assume I'm going to use the exact same example that I listed. So I'm going to say, okay, my list equals to, let's say 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what I wanted to do is to simply square each element in here. So simple way, you say, okay, this is my input list. I'm going to create an out list, right? And I'm going to create it as an empty first. I'm going to go ahead, create a loop for element in my list. So every time I will go in my list in here, grab an element, which is going to be element here, maybe 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. Every time I will take it, right? I'm going to take the element. All right, I'm going to square it. That's how to square it, right? And what I need to do is to take the square of the element and append it. It's kind of, think of it as concatenation, just taking the element and append it to my list. Take the element, the next element, and append it to the list, and so on. So to do that, I'm going to say, okay, output underscore list dot append, and I'm going to append that new element to my list in here. Okay, all right. And afterwards, after I'm done the loop, I'm just going to go here and print my new output underscore list. All right. Again, let's actually run it and see what's going to happen. Shift enter. Okay, so now we have a problem. It's because out list, it's actually called output list. My apologies. And here, actually, let's call it output list. Shift enter. Here we go. So as you guys can see here, this is the original list. This is the given list, was 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is my output list, was 1, 4, 9, and 16. All right, so what do you mean by what happened? So what we have done here is that we created an output list and we initialize it as empty, just, blank, empty list. And what we have done, we created a loop that takes each element within my list, take the element, square it, and append it to my output list, and keep repeating. So we keep doing this, so we end up with basically an elements that are kind of a square of the original element. All right. This is kind of, like the easy old way of doing it. Now we're going to become experts when it comes to list comprehension. All right, and let's see how can we do all these just, in one line of code, basically. All right, let's see how can we do that. What we could do, we could say, okay, and it might sound a little bit confusing, but please bear in mind. So we're going to create kind of, like a list like this. And what I would do, I'm going to say, okay, for element, okay, in my list. All right, so this is exactly pretty much the same as this command, right? So I'm going to say, go into my list, loop on each of these elements, all right? And what happened is, when you take the element, right, instead of creating an actual for loop and putting the columns and adding the body and creating a new list and all this stuff, we don't need to do any of that. All what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, okay, for element in my list, okay, what should I do? Take each element within my list and simply square it. I'm going to say, okay, element, square. That's it, done. Here is my list comprehension. This is just like a new kind of elegant way of creating the for loops and simply just, like iterating on a specific list, doing something with it, square it, multiply it, whatever. Shift enter, here we go. And we'll be able to create kind of, like a new list, you can call it whatever, that has these kind of new element. And that's why we call it new list comprehension. Again, very elegant, very powerful way of doing a lot of commands, summarize a lot of commands, for loops and stuff, just in a very small one line of code. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is please go ahead, pause the video. What I wanted you guys to do is to simply take all these elements, and instead of squaring it, what I want you guys to do is to take each of these elements and multiply it by 10. So I want to see the results. It's basically 10, 20, 30, and 40. Please go ahead, pause the video, and please use list comprehension, obviously. So I'm going to want you guys to kind of use this, very similar to this command, to simply multiply all the elements by 10. Please go ahead, pause the video, and I will see you guys after the challenge. All right, I hope you guys were able to figure out the challenge. What I ask you guys to do is to simply take, again, think of it this way, element in my list. Every time I'll take the element, all right? Sorry, 4 elements in my list. Every time I'll take the element, I will take the element and simply multiply by 10. That's it. Okay, I'll shift enter, here we go. So we ended up by 10, 20, 30, and 40. Okay, awesome. All right, let's take a look at another example. Let's assume that I wanted, for instance, to start with a specific, again, empty list. So I'm going to start with a new list. Let's call it my list, equals to a bunch of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And what I wanted to do is to simply create, again, using the conventional way, using the basic old way, create a for loop that simply goes in there and only extract the even numbers. And out of these even numbers, I just wanted to square only even numbers. So simply put, I wanted the output to be 2 squared, which is 4, 4 squared, which is 16, 6 squared, which is 64, and then 8 squared, and then afterwards we're gonna be, 6 squared, which is 36, 8 squared, which is 64, and then 10 squared, which is 100. So let's see how can we do that with a conventional way, okay? So I'm gonna say, okay, my list, or we'll call it, let's say, new list. This is the output list. Let's call it, find it as empty first. And what I would do, then I'm gonna say, okay, for I in my list. So every time, go in my list. Let's first check if that number is even or odd. I'm gonna say, okay, if I divided by 2 was equals to 0, right? So if it's an even number, okay, take that number and simply take the new list dot append. So again, append to it that number, whatever that number, square. So if the number is even, so if you find that even number, go here, take that new list and take that number, square it, and append it to my new list. And then when you're done, you just go ahead and print your new list. All right, shift enter. Here we go. Now we're able to print 4, 16, 36, 64, and 100. Let's see how can we do that using list comprehensions. Again, one command, one line, and we'll call it a day. Okay, so what we could do, we're gonna say, okay, new underscore list equals to, all right? And we open basically two kind of a list like this. I'm gonna say, okay, for I in my list, it's exactly the same as we have done here. For I in my list, I'm gonna do this, right? Okay, all right. What I need to do is I need to add a condition here, okay? And then the return are gonna be here, which is, what I need to do after, if the elements satisfy that condition, I need to put it here before the for loop, which is a little bit confusing if you think about it. Again, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna say, okay, for I in my list, if you find the I index divided by 2 was equals to 0, which means if you find that number is even number, okay, what should I do? What should I do is not written here, okay? It's written before the 4, okay? It's confusing as hell, but that's fine. So that's for I in my list. If you read it like that, if I was divided by 2 equals to 0, if my number is even, what I should do, I'll take that number and square it. That's it, okay? List comprehension, it's amazing. You simply just summarize or, like kind of knock down all these lines into just one single line. Run it again. Let's take a look at new list. Here we go, 4, 16, 36, 4, and 100. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's take a look at a quick challenge, okay? It's mini challenge. What I ask you guys to do is I'm gonna provide you with a temperature underscore C, okay? And which is simply just a list of temperatures in degrees Celsius, 25, 30, 40, and 50, all right? And what I ask you guys to do is to use list comprehension to simply convert temperature Celsius to temperatures Fahrenheit. All right, so please write, kind of a list comprehension here. So simply gonna create a for loop that goes in here, take the elements in here, and simply do the conversion from Celsius to Fahrenheit. If you guys remember, from Celsius to Fahrenheit, the equation was 9 divided by 5 times the Celsius plus 3 divided by 2, right? My apologies, plus 32. So this is the equation. So equation was 9 divided by 5 times temperature in Celsius plus 32. That will give us the temperature in Fahrenheit. All right, this is the equation. Please go ahead, pause the video, and I'll see you guys after the challenge. All right, I hope you guys were able to figure out the challenge. What I ask you guys to do is to simply use list comprehension to kind of transform that list, which is temperature in Celsius, to temperatures in Fahrenheit. Let's see how can we do that. We're going to say, okay, for I in temperature C. So every time go into that temperature C, grab an element. Okay, what should I do with it? There is no condition, right? So I don't need to add if condition in here. I'm going to do that on all elements. So I'm going to say, okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say 9 divided by 5, right, times I plus 32, okay, plus 32, my apologies. Here we go. So every time I'm going to take the temperature, which is going to be element within the temperature C, which is 25 first, and then 30, and then 40, and so on. Take that number, multiply it by 9 divided by 5 plus 32, and that should be temperature in Fahrenheit. Shift enter. Let's take a look at temperature Fahrenheit. Control V. Here we go. And that's the translation simply of all the entire list here into a new list that has temperatures in Fahrenheit. All right, perfect. All right, let's take a look at one last example, and that should conclude the list comprehension. Let's assume that I wanted, for example, to define a string. So I'm going to define a string and call it my string equals to, and I'm going to say I am becoming a master, a Python master. All right, just a string, okay? And maybe let's define in 30 days. I'm becoming a Python master in 30 days. And what I wanted to do is to simply return back only the numbers. I just wanted to return only the 30 here. How can I do that? Using list comprehension. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to create another list, and that list is going to call it numbers equals to. And what I wanted to do is to simply loop here on each element, each character. So I'm going to say, okay, for I in my string. So that will go ahead and loop in each element in here character. Every time I have to check. So I'm going to say, okay, if you find my character I dot is digit, again, that's pretty new. We haven't discussed that before. But the overall idea is, okay, check that number. If the number is digit, was digit, okay, so it was like a number like 3 and 0, right? So this is kind of, we return true if the number is digit, we return false if not. What we need to do, just return I. That's it. So please go ahead, check each of the characters in there in my string, grab any of that, make that check if that character is digit or not. If it is digit, just return it, and that's it. Shift enter. Okay, let's take a look at numbers. So we're gonna print the numbers. Shift enter, here we go. So I'll be able to return back the 3 and 0, which is the only 2 elements in here within my string. All right, okay, and that's pretty much all what I have for this lecture. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let's recap what we have done so far. In this lecture, we have been able to learn about list comprehension, which is a very elegant new way of just, writing a lot of lines of code into a very simple line of code in an elegant way, just simply converting a list into another list in one line of code. We have a list and we wanted to convert it, for example, let's say square it or multiply it by 10 or do whatever. We can do that using these commands. And what we could do as well, that we can add an additional condition as well. Okay, if you want to kind of, add a little bit of smartness in there. And we're able as well to maybe use here kind of, special functions, like an is digit, for instance, to check if that digit or not. And then using list comprehension as well, we're able to extract the numbers 3 and 0 out of my string. All right, that's pretty much all I have for this lecture. I hope you guys enjoyed it. The next lecture, I'm going to walk you through the while loops, which is really interesting as well. Just a different kind of taste, to perform a loop, similar to for loops. And that should conclude that section. Best of luck, and I will see you guys in the next lecture.